money from somewhere else. So we've got to be careful buying or agreeing to things at the ballot box that may sound good at the time, but now we fixed that problem going forward. We now have gone to the voters in '08 and they agreed to pass a new law that says any new voter-approved mandates has to have a new funding source to go with the new spending. And if the funding source doesn't come in at the levels projected, the spending has to be reduced to whatever the new funding is. So going forward, we've solved that problem, but over the last 10 years there were 2 items that got in there where the legislature has to spend the money whether they have it or not.
I have another question on the $100 million on the DPS shift. Tell me exactly what did you do there? They took $100 million away from DPS?
No, they took $100 million that was supposed to be used for highway maintenance and paid for the DPS. Instead of paying for the DPS out of the general fund like it normally is, they used money that was supposed to be used for highway maintenance.
But DPS has also taken a 5% pay cut.
Well, there have been some cuts to DPS.
She's got a DPS.
I have a DPS son, and I keep having to bail him out.
Okay.
You do too? You have to bail yours out too because their income keeps going down?
Almost all of the state agencies have had some cuts.
Right. Well, what he said, he says, Mom, if that sales tax does not pass, they take another 5% cut. And I also have a friend that works for motor vehicles here in Flagstaff, and they have been, they have furlough days now, and their income is going this way, and they're all going, we're not surviving as it is, so now what happens?
I would be very interested if people would go back and look at the agency that they work for and say, what was our budget in '06? And can we live off that? Because they just barely cut the total of spending to about 8.9. That's still $600 million more than what we were spending in '06. So now most of the state agencies have had cuts. In the Secretary of State's office, we've had a 17% cut and a 5% cut. So almost 22%. But we have done it by not filling positions as they became vacant.
Well, that kind of DPS is starting to do the same thing. They're not hiring.
Yeah. So we're just we're spreading the people further and further. And we've got, when I first became the secretary, we had 48 full-time positions authorized for our agency. And right now we're operating on about 36 or 7, I think. We're just asking people to pull in there and doing more with fewer people.
Well,
but we've also reduced
they don't work any overtime.
Right, but we've also reduced our wait times. At Secretary of State's office, our wait times are running about 2 weeks to get a thing back, and we've cut that down to 2 days. So it's just a matter of using your resources wisely, spreading them a little further, and doing the best you can.
Do you think that DPS almost shot themselves in the foot when they put up all the photo radars? Now it seems like when you're driving down the freeway, if you're going to the other side of the state, you have all these, instead of people, you just have cars parked there saying photo or radar. We spent a lot of money on that, which could have went to manpower instead of...
Actually, DPS, they give out tickets, but the money they collect goes to the county they're in. It doesn't go to DPS.
Yeah.
It goes to the county.
There's a weird cost-sharing
formula.
formula.
I mean, if my son writes a ticket, it doesn't go to DPS. It goes to the county. He writes the ticket in.
The whole photo radar has not turned out nearly as what they thought.
It seems that as we look ahead, and JLBC, Joint Legislative Budget Committee, does projections going all the way to 2015, the picture looks grimmer and grimmer in terms of revenue. Revenue's not going to be there because structurally Arizona depends on construction, new construction, like you said, homes, new cars, that's not happening. And so the question is, combined with the revenue projections that are out there, as well as the decline in the stimulus money, which will not be around, and the increase, which we're not even seeing it here, would just go right through the roof, actually, of the new health care unfunded mandates for the states.
The federal health care bill.
This is a massive thing that we're not even seeing here. You combine all this, how are we going to balance of budget within the next 3-4 years, because the 2010 budget, it's over, because July starts pretty
Few
soon.
months,
And we're gonna continue to do these sweeps and all this.
Well, we're getting
over.
down to the,
There's no
we
sweeping
can't
left.
sell
No
buildings
sweep,
again.
yeah,
We
they
can't-
can't do
sweeping
anything,
left.
yeah. But what can the state sell now?
Get the
Land?
vacuum cleaner.
They're gonna start selling state lands, and they're gonna, you know, so the solutions are gonna have to be very drastic. I don't see it any other way.
Right.
And
So we're gonna have to cut spending back to these levels or lower. I believe that we need to look at our tax code. And we've got some attractive parts of Arizona's tax code, but we've also got some negative parts to it. And we need to address the negative parts so that Arizona is as attractive as possible to companies from other states around the country where they are raising taxes in many of these states.
So we should be cutting taxes for companies that move to Arizona?
No, not only for the ones moving here, but for example, I would set our capital gains rate at 0 for the next 5 or 10 years, which would be not only for those that might want to come, but for those that are already here to generate investment. The business personal property tax is a very small sliver of money that comes into the state, but it's very onerous to businesses who have to pay forever and ever.
It's the craziest tax I've ever seen.
It is. It generates very little money, but in the minds of companies, especially capital-intensive companies or high-tech or a lot of companies that might want to look to Arizona to come, they got to keep track of every desk, everything that they ever bought,
That's
and
insane.
pay a
That's really
property tax
insane
on it
tax.
forever. And yet it generates a minuscule amount of money. Our personal income tax rates are fairly favorable with most states, but our business income tax rates are not. We need to shave that down a little bit. I would zero out capital gains for 5 or 10 years, and I would eliminate the business personal property tax completely. And that, combined with all of the other assets that Arizona has, I think would make us attractive to attracting companies in from around the country and get jobs regrowing in Arizona. We get this moving up while we cut the spending back to the levels that we can afford and have lived with before. We can get there.
At what point in here did the city of Flagstaff get our bill to help balance this darn thing? What was?
Well, that's another thing that the state has done, is
They
that
stole it from the city.
every so often, yeah, they've, and it was back in, I think, '09.
Oh, no, okay. Yeah.
Which I don't support. When I was in the legislature, having started on a city council in Prescott,
Yeah.
I never felt it was appropriate for the state to balance our problems on the backs of taking money from the cities or counties.
Then the League of Cities and Towns sued on that.
Right.
They sued the legislature on that issue, so.
We incentivized retirements in the city last year. We offered anyone who had
Early retirement.
no. They were qualified. They already had
Okay.
had whatever numbers.
80
they
points or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it was. And we wanted to get some fresh blood, which also would hire people out, allow people to move up in the organization and everything. And we had, I don't know, it's 10 or 12 people retired last year. We got a bill from the state retirement for $500,000 because these people left too early.
What did you tell them?
My personal one, I don't pay them. Don't pay it. I mean, these people were already qualified to leave. You expected them to hang around. It's called liability or something. And the liability was like $500,000 to the city. And
Well,
but anyway.
I've kept you
No.
plenty long. I appreciate your time and attention. Happy to answer any other questions. I appreciate you coming this evening. And as I mentioned, if you can help me with some signatures and $5 forms to get my name back on the ballot and run for office, I'd appreciate it.
Now, I know that the
I'm not here at state
Phoenix,
expense.
School district just went through some cuts of teachers.
There are some districts that are announcing reductions in force of teachers. And
Yeah, and they had just 2 cuts. My niece just made the 2 cuts. She's English as a second language teacher. How does the immigration or the non-immigration or anything
That's a good
affect
question.
our school systems? Because she actually teaches these children who cannot speak English. I think they speak it better than they want to admit. But
I usually get asked, what does illegal immigration cost the state? It's probably about